Hey there, welcome to episode 63 of Social Business Engine, the podcast that showcases thought leaders who represent modern business in action. People in business who are getting results through the culture and technology of social. I'm your host, Bernie Borges of Find and Convert. Hey, thanks for a slice of your day today. On this episode, I'm excited to bring you Paul Albright. Paul is the Senior Social Media Manager for Albertsons Safeway, a Fortune 50 company and the second largest food and drug retailer in North America. As you'll discover, Paul has been very influential on how the Safeway brand uses digital communication channels and social media in particular. Paul is going to explain how he considered three distinct approaches to convince Safeway senior management to invest in social media. And you'll hear about all three approaches that he considered, the one that he selected, and how it was the right choice and the results that he's driving for this Fortune 50 brand. This episode is sponsored by Cision. We've partnered with Cision to publish Social Business Journal Volume 2, a how-to guide in influencer relations. Visit socialbusinessengine.com/Cision to download this journal and up your influencer marketing game in 2015. And now let's get to my conversation with Paul Albright from Safeway. Paul, welcome to the Social Business Engine podcast.
Hey, thanks, Bernie. I'm really happy to be here today. Thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, absolutely. I'm excited to have you here, and I'm excited about this topic because it is a topic that we talk a lot about here on the Social Business Engine podcast, and that is, how do you convince executives, how do you convince senior management to invest in social media? And I know that is something that you have presented at conferences, and you've got a great story to tell. So let's just begin. For those that may not be familiar with Safeway, well, how about a quick little overview of Safeway?
Sure. Safeway is the second largest national grocery chain in the United States, Fortune 50 company, as you mentioned before. Primary footprint is in the Pacific Northwest, Southern California, Texas, Washington, D.C. So we have about 1,200 stores that operate under different banner headings. So you might, depending on where you live, you might know us from a different name. But we are the parent company, headquartered in Pleasanton, California, about a half hour east of San Francisco.
Okay, terrific. Oh, many moons ago, I actually worked in Pleasanton. Brings back memories. Okay, well, let's move on with this podcast. So, Paul, you say that social media is the only media. Now, let's talk about how you convinced the executives at Safeway to invest in social media. And as I said in my introduction, you actually considered three distinct approaches. So let's begin there. What were the three distinct approaches that you thought about?
Yeah, I think, going back a little bit, any social marketer will emphasize and understand that it's a come from behind story. Social media has always been maligned in a way because of its inability to properly report or impact sales in a direct fashion. This is going back a couple of years, mind you. And the focus has always been on growing communities and using these own channels in a free way to impact results. And it's always been a soft marketing. It's never been a direct response type of channel. But when I say it's the only media, what I want to color that with is by saying it's the most effective, I think, form of media today and moving forward because of its impactful word-of-mouth power. It's a great advertising opportunity for a brand to expose itself and be transparent and relate to consumers in a very impactful way. That's why I think it's the only media going forward. And I say that with some bravado because it's obviously in my title of my job. But in fact, thinking about how I tried to gain more respect and gain more dollars and gain more resources for social, I approached it in three different ways. First, I was trying to figure out what I could do. The first approach was trying to figure out what the company was trying to accomplish, what the digital marketing team was trying to do, and how it was measuring its success. And, from a social perspective, the metrics are always a little bit different. And so I tried to align my metrics with what the digital team was aligning to. And at the time, it was impressions and frequency and TRPs and different things that didn't really align directly with social.
Mm-hmm.
So what I felt I had to do is, in order for me to be part of the party, I had to change. I had to adapt and just say, okay, well, this isn't really in alignment with what they're saying as far as my social metrics, as far as reach and engagement and true social ROI. But you know what? This is what they want, so I'm going to give them what they want. So you kind of swallow your pride, and it's just survival at that point. So if you can't beat them, you got to join them.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started aligning my social specific metrics with those from the rest of the digital marketing team, what you start seeing is low performance and lots of disclaimers. You're trying to tell a story through a lens that they're not looking. And so by changing to accommodate what the executives are looking for, I actually put social in the corner. And it was something that I would not suggest people do, even though it's an uphill battle trying to break your way in and say, this is what social can do. They weren't listening. So I try to translate the data into something they can understand and interpret, but actually it backfired. So that was the first approach.
So let me ask you though. I want to unpack it a little bit, and that is about how long did you actually try that approach?
That approach lasted, I'd say, a solid 6 or 8 months.
Okay.
It took its time to figure out what it was the digital marketing team was measuring itself by, and then aligning my metrics to be folded into those dashboards. So it was a considerable amount of time in marketing speak, but in my timeline at Safeway, it was a blip.
Right. Okay. And at what point did you know you had to make a change and kind of pivot?
Well, when I realized that my seat at the table wasn't very large, and my respect wasn't being garnered by the executives, and the plans were not including social as they should, I felt betrayed by my family of marketers, and I felt like it was my turn to light the torches and come to the table and tell them what they needed to know about social media. So the second approach was making them understand and educating as many people as I could about what social media could do and the metrics that we were governed by. And this was a time, and people might remember when Facebook was throwing all kinds of different new metrics at us, like people talking about this and why fan count doesn't really matter. And I was on roadshow terror to say, this is what you need to do. And what I was doing was saying, now that you've understood what digital marketing can do, now you need to learn more. And you need to pay attention to social in a different way. And the questions you're asking that are relevant to digital marketing at large aren't relevant to social. It's a unique animal, and I'm going to beat it into you. Mm-hmm. And if you don't get on board, it's your loss, because this is the wave of the future. And what I thought was actually going to be a very positive outcome, as opposed to approach one, actually was worse. There was greater distance to social and more confusion, and no one wants to be the problem child at the table. And executives don't have time to learn a new channel and its performance metrics and why they should pay attention in a different way. And then as a result, I didn't get my resources. I didn't get greater budget, and nor did I get a bigger seat at the table.
Okay. So I have to ask, about how long did you try approach 2?
That was a little bit longer, unfortunately. Those roadshows took a while. Bernie, I'd say it lasted about 10 months to a year.
Okay.
So I'd say it was a little bit longer, and it was more painful, so it maybe seemed longer in my own head. But what it did was also, I was working side by side with my platform partners to help me tell the story. So my Facebook representatives, Twitter representatives, Pinterest representatives coming in and saying, look, they need to understand what we're about. I need you to bolster my claim. And so what it did was, in a positive way, helped forge greater and deeper relationships with my partners there to help me tell the story, which helped get into approach 3.
Okay. So since you considered 3 approaches, I think we can surmise that we're about to hear about the approach that actually worked.
Yeah, this is, I mean, and someone listening to this podcast might say, why did you start with approach number 3? And I think
Well,
the
hindsight is always 2020, right?
yes, and I think that what's clear here is that um, I couldn't have gotten to approach 3 without having approach 1 and 2 under my belt. But where my conversations with the platforms dovetailed into this approach was they realized that what was most important was understanding what the business objectives are for Safeway. And what came to light for me was the fact that Safeway didn't have a full understanding of that. And where social played a huge role was helping define what it is the business problems were and what not only social, but all of digital marketing can solve. So when we were briefed on the different campaigns, we would go around the table and say, how can we solve these business problems with social strategies? And so if the business objective is to reach a large amount of people, social can do that. If it's application downloads, we can do that. If it's engagement rate, we can do that. So it was a matter of ticking off a list and finding out what it was they were going for, and then finding solutions we can come to the table to prove that. And what's really critical here is also making sure that the social data is compatible with the digital metrics, digital marketing analytics, versus the first approach where you're trying to shoehorn it in. You had to figure out how to complement the overall data stream versus having it come in from the left. And what also social can prove out in a very large way is what I consider one of the paramount reasons why brands such as ours use social media is customer service and reputation management. As a large target Fortune 50 company, we get inundated with issues, not just dirty bathrooms and long lines, which are standard fare, but we get hit with things that are very large scope as far as GMO labeling or assaults on CEOs and the brand itself. And so it's imperative for us to have an opportunity to respond to those audiences with this social strategy and then share those wins out. Mm-hmm. So one example I can give on that front was with a situation called pink slime that came out a few years ago, where there was an inhibitor within the beef product to mitigate any kind of spoilage, which is approved by the FDA. But when the consumers came back and said, we don't want that in there, we've sensed that heating up on social media. We're able to work with our public affairs partners in a very expedited fashion and get in front of the executives to make a multi-million-dollar decision to clear our shelves. That surfaced only because social media made it so. So that seat at the table has grown considerably, not only based on the fact that we're able to show value through solving business issues and problems with social strategies, but also revealing the fact that we have this duality within social media, which is a dialogue that we have with consumers, that through this canary in the mine approach, we're able to deliver in full.
Okay. Now, Paul, I want to talk a little bit more about a few more examples that I know you're prepared to discuss. But first, I want to pause for a brief message from our sponsor, Cision. Cision is widely recognized as a leader in public relations software, and we are excited to partner with Cision in Volume 2 of the Social Business Journal. This is a how-to guide in influencer marketing where you'll discover a 3-step process from Cision on how to develop an influencer relations program. And you'll hear from 21 business experts on everything from what an ideal influencer looks like to the secret sauce of penetrating the sphere of an influencer. These business experts deliver bite-sized insights to give you actionable takeaways for an influencer relations strategy. So you can get your copy of Social Business Journal, Volume 2 at socialbusinessengine.com/Cision, spelled CISION. Now, Paul, you said earlier that you got a seat at the table and you got some incremental budget. I have to ask, though, when I think of large retailers, food retailers like a Safeway, I think of television advertising and print. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how some of the budget shifted and how you got more budget and what you've been doing with that budget in social.
Sure. So you are absolutely correct in saying that TV, print, and radio have been the go-to marketing tools for groceries. And so I think that that's not going to change for a while. And the bulk of the dollars go there quite simply because those are great reach plays. They really do reach the mass audiences. And when you're a mass grocer, you're trying to get as many people through those doors as possible. That's the way to do it. Another reason is because I liken it to nuclear disarmament. All the brands do the same thing. Now, if we were to stop and they were to continue, that would bring certain death to the executives, they think.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if we all just held hands and said 1, 2, 3, we all stop, this madness may stop as well. So we have to contend with the fact that the majority of the dollars will be siphoned to those large reach vehicles. That's a true fact.
Mm-hmm.
However, what's different about Safeway, and one of the main reasons why I joined the company a few years ago, is their focus on digital marketing, and specifically data marketing. We have a club card, as many brands have, where people swipe that thousands and thousands of times a day and give us rich information about their shopping behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And a few years ago, we launched a program called Just for You. Just for You is a personalized coupon mechanism where you can digitally clip coupons, add them to your club card without having to break out the scissors. What this does is furnish the customers with personalized deals based on their shopping behavior, which is really key to the success of marketing, I think. With social, when you add data, it's like adding fuel to a fire. Mm-hmm. And that's where I really was excited about joining the company. And the last piece is they're really focused, especially since there's so much competition now with Walmart and Target and Costco and the regular groceries and the independents. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of competition and choices for consumers. Pre-shop behavior is where digital marketing really comes in. It swoops in and is able to encourage someone before they even know it to turn left instead of turning right. And with social, what you're doing is influencing that buying decision before they even pick up a pen to write a list for their weekend shopping trip. Mm-hmm. And so I like that top of the funnel seat. I like being able to leverage different types of tools. We have influencer relations. We have Facebook posts and tweets. We've got pins. We've got, other ways of engaging with people before they even think about food. And we want to be the top of their minds. So the dollar carve out was predicated on those different pieces that Safeway is putting into place and still does, with digital marketing leading the pack with that pre-shop behavior marketing.
Okay. Now, Paul, when I look at the downloads for my podcast, I see that there are people from California that are listening to this podcast, and clearly those are people that are going to be not just familiar with the Safeway brand, but in many cases very likely customers, consumers who physically shop at your store. But I also have listeners that are not in your geographic footprint, not only in the U.S., but outside the U.S. So I would love for you to drill down a little bit more on the Just For You program. Can you give us a little more insight? Because you really have my attention on that. You say that it's all about the data and how you're gathering data on the consumer. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. And I don't think my icky meter, I have an icky meter inside me that goes off when I think of data sometimes, and I think of NSA and drones. But I mean, at this point in our world, I think most people realize that if they're giving their information to a company or to a brand to track their purchases, that they've given that license to use that data in the best way possible to market back to them. And I think that, people understand what cookies are, and they think that pixels are being dropped on pages. The awareness level is much greater now than it was, say, 10 years ago about the collection of data. And for marketers several years ago, even today, I'm sure, gathering data means a couple things. One, you can market to them much better in a much richer way and offer them products and services that they're more apt to buy than just shotgun approach. That's a normal case. The bad case that still surfaces, unfortunately, are people aggregating those lists to resell for money as well. Safeway does not do that. We're very, very clear that our data is for our purposes only. Mm-hmm. We don't participate in third-party distributions. And so it's very clean. And so when people are swiping their cards and data is coming back to us, we're looking at carts, we're looking at shopping behaviors, frequencies, basic things to help us better sell to customers and enhance their customer experience. So the Just For You program was something that was promised to Wall Street when Safeway was a public company prior to acquisition, as a way to, make more money. It's an obvious play, and delight consumers the same way. So if you've told us for the last 10 years of all the things you've purchased, it's well within our reason to think that you want to have a better shopping experience and save more money.
Mm-hmm.
And so dynamic pricing is something that's very simple to do on a car lot. You come in and buy a car, I come in 10 minutes later and buy the same car, you're probably going to pay a different price than I pay. It's just a known thing. It's an axiom of life. But if we're looking at a gallon of milk and you buy it for $3 and I buy it for $4, how does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, because we can't have a guy standing there switching out the price tag on the milk all day long, not knowing your price sensitivity levels. With Just For You, we take that all away. So if you're able to dynamically price the entire store in a digital fashion, what you're going to be doing, the house will win in the long run, because you're going to meet people's price sensitivities when they're willing to pay for those things at the right price. So overall, the whole store might have a price tag on it, but if you have Just For You, you can look at your Just For You list and say, I buy a ton of avocados. And hey, look, they have 10 avocados for $1 here. That price is specific to you.
Mm-hmm.
You can't share that with me.
Really?
That's for you, based on your loyalty and patronage.
Okay.
Now, there might also be inferences like the Amazon model, where you buy certain things and then manufacturers, CPGs, come in and say, they buy these, they might want to buy these as well. We'll give them a price break because of their history. So all this has the consumer in mind when you think about it, but it's not altruistic. We're corporate, we're a company. We want to make money. We want to give the best value to the best consumers all the time. And 10 years ago, you couldn't do that because dynamic pricing does not exist in stores. Now with Just For You, it does, and it rewards the customer at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So the whole, it literally is just for me. So based on my consumer buying behaviors, there's dynamic pricing, and is it sort of dynamic presentation of specials and that kind of thing? Like, for example, in my household, we don't buy peanut butter, we buy sun butter. So then in a Just For You situation, my household might be presented some opportunities to maybe stock up on sun butter because they're on special or something to that effect?
That's very much so. And if you think about the inferences I can make based on that sun butter purchase, there might be other products that are delivered based on algorithms in the back end that we say, well, this person might have a peanut allergy, right? So there could be other things that can go with that. But in the simplest form, that's pretty much what it is. Right. You've given us our data. Our promise back to you is to use this data to help your shopping experience. What better way than to present you with digital coupons that help your shopping experience be better, and also go back to that pre-shop behavior. You're more likely to, when you buy a Groupon or a Living Social, that's burning a hole in your pocket because you've exchanged dollars for that future purchase or service, right? With Safeway, we're not asking you to buy the milk in advance, but the mere fact that you've added it to your card has the same behavioral effect.
Right. And I assume this is all available on mobile device.
Yes, it's an app.
It's an app. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. So before we segue to my one thing question, Paul, where are you with the seat at the table and with your overall stature at Safeway and with regards to the role that social and digital is playing?
So currently, my seat still does influence the social media campaigns for the Albertsons Safeway company in ways that impact the larger national campaigns that we're going to be running. One thing that's very attractive about this merger, this acquisition, is that now we went from 1,200 stores or 1,100 stores to 2,300 stores nationwide.
Wow!
So we have banners across the nation from Hawaii to Vermont. So if you're in Jewel, Osco, Shaw's, Acme, United, Vaughn's, Pavilions, Safeway, Albertsons, we canvass the United States now. The number one grocer is Kroger. The number two is now Albertsons Safeway. We're privately held by Cerberus, and what we're doing is trying to make the best experience for the customer as possible through this unification of these brands. And one thing that I think is going to be very important to the success, which I'm also governing from a social perspective, is the launch of our private labels or our own brands. These are products that our own company creates and sells in its stores, which are on parity with national brands and at a better price point. So there's some great opportunities with social to really, reach out to these new communities and grow them and introduce them to the brand, bring great customer service, and introduce these private labels in an effective way.
Outstanding. Well, it's great progress and a great story. And I think I want to have you back in about a year or so just to have enough time to maybe have some sort of the next chapter in the story, Paul. So I look forward to that. At this time, what I want to do is I want to segue to my one thing question. And Paul, you know that this is where I ask you, if there's any one thing that you could change about the way that business is conducted today, what would that be?
I thought about this question, and I think I hope I don't sound like I'm pandering to any one given audience, and I hope I don't think people think I'm ripping from the headlines just to be cute. But I do think there's a disparity today with the demographic representation within our organizations. I think that women contribute. I've always been in public relations and marketing, and so I've had the luxury of working with a large majority of women in the workplace. But with grocery, and I'm sure there's probably other companies that can just tag that name to the list, the representation is very poor. And it's always curious to me when I see that. And living in California, I had the luxury of being in a very diverse environment where many cultures are represented as well. Mm-hmm. But within the workplace, you don't see those numbers pan out. And I don't know why that is. And I've always questioned that because coming from, again, public relations and marketing background, I've never experienced that. Mm-hmm. But I'm seeing it happen more and more, and it's taking the headlines more and more. But I think that if I were to change something or, how it's conducted, I think that that's something that companies could benefit from greatly is making sure that the composition of their executive suites match those on the street.
Mm-hmm. So more diversity, more demographic and cultural diversity that, as you say, aligns with the reality of the population.
Yeah, and I've always worked for consumer-facing companies that make, toys or provide entertainment or food. And I think that to be in touch with your consumers, you really have to understand who they are. And there's many times I've been in marketing meetings where people say, what I do is, and I just cringe. Yeah. Because when you market to one, you put serious blinders on, right, and you're very ineffective at what you're going to do. Yeah. And so understanding the composition of your audience and your customers starts from the executive class.
Yeah. That's a great point. Well, thank you for sharing that, Paul. That's a really insightful point of view, and appreciate you sharing that. Well, Paul,
thank you.
Sure. Let's let my listeners know how they can connect with you online, and if there's anything that you'd like to perhaps send them to online to learn more about Safeway.
Sure. Safeway.com is a great resource for all things, including the Just For You program we mentioned before. And it also can break down all the different own brands of the private label products that we have. And it can also introduce you to the social channels. There's direct links to all of our social platforms there. And I think it'd be of interest also to listeners to follow the story of Cerberus and Albertsons and Safeway as we evolve through this merger. It's quite a large one. And I think that it's going to be exemplary for the industry going forward, and other companies that want to bring two best practices together, two different cultures together, into, again, serving the customers we have.
And to dramatically expand the footprint from a very regional footprint to a much broader footprint, as you say, really across North America. And correct me if I'm wrong, still in North America, right? You're not outside of that continent right now?
North America, yeah.
Right, but much broader than previously. Okay, terrific.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, my listeners know that what you just referenced, those will be linked up in our show notes at socialbusinessengine.com. And I want to thank you, Paul, for jumping on the podcast with me here today and sharing your success and your story at Albertsons Safeway. And like I said, let's do this again in about a year when we can look at the next chapter. And I'm sure that you'll have a lot more progress that you can share at that time.
Thank you, Bernie.
Fantastic. Well, as I mentioned a moment ago, please visit our show notes page for links to things that we discuss here today. And while you're there, be sure to pick up your digital copy of Social Business Journal Volume 2, a how-to guide in influencer marketing that we produced in cooperation with Cision. And of course, while you're there, remember to visit our video channel where you can catch interviews with other inspiring business professionals that are succeeding in modern business through social. And as always, I do like to ask, if I may, that if you enjoy this podcast, please consider writing a review in iTunes. Reviews in iTunes serve kind of like SEO juice. It helps other people learn about it and maybe reach those people that might want to enjoy this kind of content, because they are in a role where this content will help them do their jobs better and maybe convince their executives to jump on the social bandwagon. So just go to socialbusinessengine.com/iTunes for a direct link to write that review. Hey, until next time, this is Bernie Borges of Find and Convert, wishing you continued success on your social business journey.